Let's talk Jaws live, baby. You're gonna need a bigger boat.
All right, here we are. Happy Thursday. Welcome back. We are live tonight. Good to see everybody. Broadcasting over across YouTube as well as the Facebook pages. And today's a big day. Tonight's a big night. You guys caught the promo we had up. Today is July 30th. So today is the memorial of the USS Indianapolis. And in lieu of that, we have an incredible guest that I'm very stoked to have on here, and that's Mr. Jim Belcher Jr. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to come on today. Applaud you for doing this.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Day already.
Oh yeah, it's been a long day. Thank you.
Jim today, as I'm sure many days, spent the day running the memorial service and things today for the USS Indianapolis. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm one of the volunteers that works down there for the Honor Watch. We call it the Honor Watch now, and we invite families from the Indianapolis to meet us at the National Monument here in the city of Indianapolis, down by the canal, and in remembrance and honor of the 1195 crew that were aboard the Indy. All are gone now except for Harold Bray, the last living survivor. So, yeah, we just want we want the families to have a place to come and remember the 879 who didn't come home when the ship sank, and the 316 who did come home. 315 of those are gone. So,
sure,
yeah,
excellent. We've got a handful of people joining us. One of which. Whippler himself, I knew was going to be glued to this tonight. Career military himself, and very interested in this. He just wanted to chop in and say hi, and let's go. He's ready to hear all about this. So, so we want to thank you. I thought we hit a little bit on the boat itself and the history of it. Obviously, a little bit with the sinking, but then from there, I'd love to hear about your family, your father. The connection between yourself and your father, along with the Indianapolis, as well as a little bit of a role that Jaws perhaps had, and then what has happened since your involvement up to modern day. And I thought that's going to be a great place to kind of end things for today. So,
okay.
Sound like a good idea to you guys?
Yeah, I'm ready to roll.
Awesome. So yeah. So anyone has a question or anything, right? Just jump right in, and yeah, we'll go ahead and get started here. So
I do want to say something right straight off the bat. And that's me being the granddaughter of someone who served in World War II. He was in the Navy, and then seeing Jaws and hearing about the Indianapolis. This is going to be a piece that I think we all are going to be fascinated with, and to learn about history and to be grateful that those people served. So on a personal note, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you all for inviting me.
Very cool. So we'll jump into it here. We'll start off with the Indianapolis was built, and I believe commissioned, in 1931. And I'm not too sure of all the work it did prior to World War II, but I do know of note that it carried FDR on it, I believe, two or three times.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. When it was laid down, it was actually supposed to be a light cruiser, and because of that, although it was 610 feet long, pretty good size for a ship at the time, the armor belt and the armor plating on the sides were relatively light compared to what it ended up being. It was reclassified when they decided to upgrade it to 8-inch guns instead of 6-inch guns. So it had 3 turrets, 2 forward, 1 aft, with 8-inch, 3 8-inch barrels on each turret. So it became a heavy cruiser by 32, and it was launched as a heavy cruiser, but a lot of people didn't realize it was a light cruiser in the beginning. And the reason that's significant is because of the lighter armor. It was very fast, it was lighter weight, and it moved very quickly in the water. And because of that, FDR was very impressed with the ship as far as it being a ship of state. Back in those days, presidents didn't fly; they took a Navy ship for safety, and they would visit. And FDR did visit South America on the Indianapolis, and he did a lot of traveling between Bar Harbor and Annapolis on the Indianapolis. I joked today and said it was FDR's Uber. Whenever he wanted to go anywhere, he just called on a heavy cruiser, and it showed up and took him wherever he wanted to go. But the Indianapolis was well known for transporting FDR. He actually liked the ship, and it had been designed for it to be as a flagship. So as a flagship, it had quarters for admirals or a admiral and his staff, and a staff would be almost 100 guys. So it had a lot of room for a president and his staff also.
Wow, pretty impressive. So it had quite a bit of startup going on before it even hit World War II.
Oh, yeah.
And even going into World War II, I was fascinated to come to find that it earned 10 battle stars? 10
battle stars, which it was important, but it was primarily because it was Admiral Spruance's flagship. And as a flagship with an Admiral Spruance would be commanding entire battle groups at some of the most important battles of the war. You named the major battle that was fought in the Pacific, and the Indianapolis was there with Spruance aboard, guiding the battle. And so it was a command ship for the entire fleet, carriers, submarines, all the surface ships. And so because of that, it had to be on station. And of course, when you're on station and in combat, the ship gets a battle star if the battle is fought. I was just laughing today, though, the final battle for the Indianapolis was against the I-58 when it was sunk at the end of 1945. And that's the one time they did not get a battle star.
Battle star would have been number 11, correct then, right?
Yeah, I guess you have to shoot back in order to get a battle star. I don't know what the story is, but anyway.
Was it at Iwo Jima?
No, they were at Iwo Jima, and then they were at Okinawa. And while they were at Okinawa, they pulled off station and joined several carriers and battleships and attacked Japan. These are things that a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hear about Okinawa and all that happened at Okinawa, but we don't realize that in the middle of the Okinawa campaign, a bunch of ships, just before the Okinawa campaign, a bunch of ships raided the Japanese coast and literally got close enough that they could launch planes off a regular aircraft carrier and attack coastal Japan. And we did that twice, I think, before the Indianapolis, was pulled back to the United States.
Amazing. Kind of reminiscent of the Aleutians, how few people often hear about that we were invaded by the Japanese in the Aleutian Islands up in Alaska. It's really interesting. Wow. Very cool. Got a couple other people hopping on and joining in. So Stephen Searle, one of the two boys in the movie, happens to be joining us tonight.
Yeah, I know Steve.
Yeah, and we got another Clark joining us here. Yeah, thanks for joining.
That's me.
Thank you everyone for joining. I thought it was your sister for a second.
That's me. I'm responding to Stephen and everybody. That's me.
So we know it was damaged. It was damaged by a bomb, and it had to go into California to get some work done, and that's when it received its orders for the trip to make the delivery that we've all known and talked about.
Correct.
And And we also know that your father was a part of it. So when did your father get stationed on the Annapolis? Was it in California? Was he one of the young
Yes.
group?
Yeah, he was one of the, at Mare Island, after they were attacked by kamikaze at Okinawa, the day before the invasion started, they had been, shelling the island, preparing it for the landings. And it's a heavy cruiser, so it's a far off, off the coast, and it's a flagship. Admiral Spruance was aboard with his flag group. They were hit in the early morning of March 31st by kamikaze that hit the fantail of the ship, and the bomb didn't explode on the ship. They had a 500-pound bomb strapped to this kamikaze. The plane hit the ship. The bomb broke away from the wing and went through the ship at the fantail, which is unarmored. And because of that, it was like going through paper. It went through the ship, out the bottom, and it hit one of the propeller shafts, and that's what detonated the bomb. But the problem was it punched a hole in the ship, and the water rushed in, and there were guys in the back, in the fantail areas, spaces, including the galley that was back there, and a lot of guys got trapped. And at the last minute, as the ship was taking on too much water, they had to close up some hatches and trap some fellas in the back of the ship. So they ended up with one guy killed on the deck and 8 died, sealed up inside the back of the ship until they could get them out a few days later. And they limped back to the U.S. to Mare Island for repairs. And that was serious repairs. In fact, because the damage was pretty substantial, nobody thought the ship was going to go back into the war. Everybody was pretty convinced the war was close to ending. The guessing was September or so, and there was going to be an invasion. And the ship was pretty substantially damaged, but they did rush the repairs. But at the same time, they're rushing guys off the ship because they need them in the theater that are experienced, and that ship didn't look like it was going back. So I think they kind of made a mistake in that they took off too many guys, about a third of the crew. And then once they realized they were going to need this ship for this secret mission that was coming up, they started replenishing those guys, and that's when my dad got on. He was brand new out of radio school, radioman. He was 18 years old. And so he and about a third of the crew. Think about that. Here you are going into battle, possible battle, and you've got a third guys who have never been to sea. My dad, that was his first ship, his first time at sea, and he got on in June, middle of June, and they departed Mare Island July 16th with the atomic bomb aboard.
How old was he?
He was 18 years old. He turned 18 in October before that, so he's about 18 and a half, going on 19. Yeah, he had been in the Navy since 44. He went in the officer training program, V-12 program, to be a pilot. But he was so afraid. He and his entire class of 5 at Emory University, they started in February, and by June, they thought the war was, they were hearing rumors the war was going to be over by December, so they didn't want to be stuck in school. It was a 12-month program. So they all flunked out on purpose. And this was common in World War II for the guys towards the end of the war to want to get into, because if you flunked out of the officer training, their pilot training, aviation programs, you had your contract was you go immediately in as an enlisted man onto a ship. And so what Dad didn't realize was when he dropped out of that school, they put him in the radio school, and he ended up in school almost as long as he would have been if he'd have just stayed. But none of the guys knew. Some of the guys went right on to ships. So he ended up getting assigned in June of 45 to the Indianapolis, and that was his first ship.
Jim, was that a full crew at the time? Was that what the ship normally held? Or
yeah. The peacetime complement is just under 1,000, but the wartime complement on the cruiser is about 1,195, and that's not counting the flag group that could have had about another 100 guys to it if they were on it, but they were not on it for that secret mission. Spruance and his flag group were not. They didn't need them. They didn't need to be aboard. In fact, Spruance had already transferred his flag, to another ship when they were damaged at Okinawa. So at this point, they're just trying to get back into the fight. And one thing that wasn't known, because they were being rushed to get the repairs done, actually another cruiser, the Pensacola, was picked as the ship that was going to take the atomic bomb to Tinian. But The Pensacola ended up not being quite ready, and the Indianapolis kind of leapfrogged it as far as being ready. So they switched over to the Indianapolis. So there was a lot of uncertainty as to which ship was going and when. And of course, with all the secrecy, you had all of that. Not one man on the ship, including Captain McVeigh, Charles McVeigh, knew that they were carrying an atomic bomb to Tinian. In fact, they had a pool going. A lot of the guys told me over the years, they had a pool going as to what was in a very large box that they put in. They had aircraft hangars on the heavy cruiser. They actually carried 4 reconnaissance spotter planes. And so inside one of the hangars, they had taken off 2 of the planes and 1 of the catapults, and they had put the atomic bomb casing in a big wooden box in the port side hangar. And so the crew saw the box coming on, and they also had this large metal cylinder, which happened to be the uranium 235, that they were going to put. They welded that inside the admiral's quarters because the admiral was not aboard. And at that point, they posted 4 Marines around the box, and the ship departed Mare Island on a speed run. They were told, Captain McVeigh was only told, every day you save in transit is a day off the end of the war. And but he had no idea what he was carrying. And the guys told me, they laughed later. They took they had a pool going as to what was in that big wooden box, and the number one guess was it was scented toilet paper for Admiral for General MacArthur. So some of the guys had pinup girls and Jeeps and staff cars and things like that. But the funniest one was the scented toilet paper. They actually, one of the guys told me, he said, Jim, they could have told us it was an atomic bomb. It wouldn't have meant a thing to us at the time because nobody had ever seen an atomic bomb. And one of the other guys said our ship was loaded with bombs. Yeah. It was loaded with bombs. He said one more bomb wouldn't have made a difference to us. I mean, so they took that bomb to Tinian and they dropped it off in 10 days. That's a record speed run for across the Pacific to this day. And then they took a slower ride back over to Guam, 2 days. And then from Guam, they were there about 12, 14 hours, and they got orders to go to Leyte in the Philippines. And what everybody thought was going to happen was they were getting ready for the invasion of Japan. They had no idea they had just delivered an atomic bomb. Everybody's expectation was we're now going to the Philippines, which is south and away from Japan. And we will be training that green crew to get ready for the battle that was coming up for sure. And at the same time, the guys from Europe were being transferred. The war ended in Europe in May. They're all transferring over to the Pacific now and getting ready for the invasion of Japan as well, and dreading it, knowing that maybe 250,000 to 1 million Americans or allies were going to die. And one of the ironies of that was, I know I explained to some of the people before, but I'll say this now. My mother's Japanese. Dad had married my mom during the Korean War after World War II, and my mother had told me that same invasion from her side might have resulted in 10 to 20 million Japanese dying. So we talk a lot about the atomic bombs in my family because my mother's Japanese. My father took the atomic bomb to Tinian as an 18-year-old, but at the same time, my mother was fighting for her life in Japan. The bombings, she lost 3 schools during the war that were firebombed or bombed outright. She was strafed by American pilots. She had so many of her own war stories. And so by the end of the war, the Japanese and she had been told that the Americans, when they come, we're going to kill everybody anyway. We were going to slaughter them. That was what they believed. The propaganda was real in that respect. And so my mother, as an 11-and-a-half-year-old girl, had already been training in school before they bombed her last school with a sharpened bamboo stick. And she was told, you kill one American before you die. They're going to kill you, but you kill one American and then you can go to heaven. And so think about that, if every Japanese citizen, and all the men were gone. The young men, the fighting men, were in the Pacific and fighting on the islands or in China. My mother's oldest brother, my uncle, Kazuhiro Inoue, was a sergeant in the Imperial Japanese Army while my dad was on the USS Indianapolis. So the dynamics of my family are pretty weird, certainly built around the bombs. And so my perspective on the bombs was formed by my mother and my father, not just American history class, which I always thought when I was a 7th, 8th grade and learning American history, and they were talking about the bombs. And in modern school today, they talk about the guilt. You know, we should feel some guilt. Maybe we should have dropped a test bomb or a demonstration bomb or something. We only had 2 bombs up to the 9th of August, and the next bomb was several weeks away. But we didn't want to let the Japanese know that. So, you dropped the first bomb and hoped they would surrender, and they didn't. You dropped the second bomb. On my grandfather, by the way, my mother's father was at Nagasaki on August 9th. So my mother's perspective of 10 to 20 million Japanese probably would have died. I think that's real. And when you go back and look at the 2 bombs, and my dad and my mom were very united in this. Dropping those bombs saved my mom's life and her family, and dropping those bombs probably saved 10 to 20 million Japanese. So 300,000 died with the 2 bombs, and that's a horrible, horrible number. But as my dad said, who was a 3-war vet, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, he said, there's nothing good about war, and people die. And that's just the sad fact of it. So the idea is to keep those deaths as low as possible. You know, in American schools, we teach how many Americans died or were going to die. We very seldom talk about everybody else and how many Germans died, how many Russians died, how many, whatever. But the Japanese side, I grew up hearing those numbers. And so I was lucky that my uncle did come home from China. He never spoke about the war, but then neither did my dad. So, sure. Until later.
Hey, Jim, was the actual bomb on the Indianapolis, or was it the parts and the uranium?
It was the parts and uranium, and it was assembled at Tinian, but generally all the parts were there. Yeah.
So it was there, it just wasn't put together yet.
That's in the box. Apparently it was the casing and some of the internals and the trigger. Dick Parabeck, we always called him the trigger man. He was tasked with carrying the whatever the uranium trigger was. He had that and brought that aboard. Of course, he didn't know what he was carrying, but at the time. And then the uranium, of course, they said it was about half of the weapons grade uranium that existed in the entire world that at that moment was on the Indianapolis and taken to. So it was very important. Captain McVeigh was also told if anything happened in transit, that all that stuff got on life rafts first, before the first man. So the guys kind of knew it must be something important.
Well, I often question, because you always read about how they welded the case to the floor of the uranium. Was that for safety, so it would go to the bottom of the ocean, or was that so it wouldn't disappear? I've often wondered that. Was there any insight to that?
Yeah, both. I think it was an element of both. One was for security, to make sure that it didn't and couldn't go anywhere quickly. But the other side of that was they would have cut it loose if they had time. If they were under attack and sinking or something, but slow sinking, maybe they would have cut it away and put it in a raft and got it out of there. But they weren't going to let it get into anybody else's hands. That's for sure. Yeah. And oftentimes the sister question to the Hiroshima bomb, little boy, that Indianapolis carried was, well, how did the other bomb get there? Because if not for the Indianapolis tragedy, you probably wouldn't know how little boy got over there. But the second bomb was flown over. And the thought there was flying was not real secure, but it was fast. So let's take one bomb one way and one bomb the other way. And at least that almost guarantees one of them will get there. So
that was Memphis Belle. Was that the one responsible for carrying that?
No, it was, I'm not even sure what type of plane took it over. I'm sure, if I got into that,
I don't
but
think it was Memphis Belle.
yeah, it was not, it would not have been that would have been a B-17. If anything, it would have been like a B-29 or something with the parts.
Awesome.
Or cargo, most likely cargo. Excuse me?
About the Hiroshima bomb? Paul Tibbets?
Yeah. Well, what about Tibbets?
No, he flew the Enola Gay, right?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
That's what
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm thinking of, yeah, my fault.
Yeah. Yeah. The Enola Gay was already there. They were moving it from Wendover in Utah over to Tinian, and they did all their training, I understood, in Utah. So, yeah, the bomb story in itself it could be a movie. And it already was. The Manhattan Project movie was really very accurate. But
The ship. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no,
I was going to say the plane that delivered the second bomb was the boxcar.
Oh yeah, as far as delivery to Nagasaki, yeah, I've been in both planes. When I go to the museums, Enola Gay is in the Dulles Museum next to Dulles Airport. The Ugar Hazy, I believe, is what it used to be called. It's there. The boxcar is in the Air Force. I'm an Air Force vet, and the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, has the boxcar. So I was able to take the Indianapolis guys to see some of the Indianapolis guys to see the Enola Gay, and the museum actually stayed open after hours to receive the guys, did a flag line for them, and moved the barriers and let them walk right up underneath the airplane and touch it and do all of those things. And I was standing under the bomb bay doors of the Enola Gay. This was several years ago with L.D. Cox, who was on the bridge of the Indianapolis when the torpedoes hit. And L.D. and I were just casually talking about looking up into the bomb bay doors when Kim Roller, a friend of ours from California, who does what I do, tells the Indianapolis story, but she does it a lot of it on the West Coast. I love her to death. She's so awesome. Dynamic, and the guys love her because sailors always love women anyway, but these guys particularly love Kim. But Kim walked up to us, LD and I, as we were in a conversation about what it must have been like for inside that plane, and Kim just walked up and she casually said Jim, because I'm half Japanese, she said, Jim, I'll bet you're the first Japanese person to stand under these bomb bay doors. And I'm looking at Kim, and I'm looking at Kim's blonde hair, and I'm going, and LD, I think, said it. He says, Kim, you really are blonde, aren't you? Or something to that effect. And we laughed, and she just turned bright red, and she knew better. She knew better. What she was trying to say is I'm the first, to stand under it right here on the floor, probably. But I said to her, no, Kim, I think about 90,000 Japanese were standing under this door before me. And it just embarrassed her. But we, the guys always saw the humor in the history, and they, for them, they carried a heavy burden for what had happened. They didn't, not so much for the atomic bomb dropping as the cost of it, because for them it kind of evened out or balanced out, because they lost 879 of their friends just 4 days after delivering that bomb to Tinian. And so there was a heavy cost to deliver that bomb.
Well, could we delve a little bit into your father, and then maybe your relationship, and that maybe a little of relevancy with Jaws there as well. So, your father went on to serve through Vietnam, which kind of blows my mind, considering his first time on a boat, that was his experience. So he continued. I mean, you talk. He
wasn't very bright.
Talk about character building, but I had read up that here's a later picture of your father.
That's it.
That obviously, the story you hear all the time. They don't say anything. They're not going to divulge any stories.
Yeah.
But that I would assume once he saw Jaws or you saw Jaws, that kind of started to open the doors a little bit.
Yeah. Dad struggled after World War II. Dad struggled. He got out in 46, but Korea started in 50. And I remember him later on telling me, not in the 50s, but later as an adult, he said, I didn't think they could win that war without me. So he went back in. He re-enlisted. And so he told his recruiter in Dothan, Alabama, he said, I'll serve anywhere except Japan. And then Dad looked at me and he said, 7 weeks later, I'm standing in Japan. That's where the Navy sent him when he reenlisted. So he was in the one place he didn't want to be because of the history with the Indianapolis. But my dad was an interesting character. He was when the character in the movie Jaws was on the screen, way before the monologue, and I had no idea that monologue was in the movie. I already identified Quint with my dad clearly, and I didn't even know that he was supposed to be an Indianapolis survivor at this point. So Dad went back in 50. Met my mother in 52 at a Christmas party, a ship's party. This is during the war. They're going back and forth to Korea.
Wow.
And they married in 55. And again, the dynamics of a grandfather that was at Nagasaki, a dad who had delivered the first bomb, an uncle who fought in World War II for the Imperial Japanese Army, and a dad who served in the U.S. Navy. I can't even imagine what it was like bringing my dad home to meet the family the first time for my mom, but what kind of bravery that took for her. But Dad was 6'4" and from Alabama. He's very country, very down to earth. And my mother was all of 5'2", and she was just gorgeous. And Dad just got smitten with her. And even though they couldn't speak each other's language in the beginning, they were able to connect and enjoy each other's company, and then eventually marry. And that was in 55. They married in 57. I was born. So that leads up to, and I was born in Japan at Yokosuka Naval Hospital. I'm the only Japanese-born child of a USS Indianapolis survivor.
Wow.
And so, again, another reason why I think it's important to be out there and telling their story. So I came to Martha's Vineyard for the 50th, but I wasn't invited. I just showed up and wandered around. And I was amazed at all the Jaws fans on the island last year. And they saw my wife and I were wearing our Indianapolis gear, of course, and everybody recognized, every single person recognized the Indianapolis. So I happened to bump into Michael Belcher and that group and several other people. And immediately it was like, you have to come back next year. So I did. I was invited back to speak. And what was interesting that happened at the 50th was Robert Cantrell and I, my shark guy, and I were and Sandy and Julia were just kind of wandering around, and we happened to see the orca, which was Michael Sterling's orca. And I didn't know any of these people. I didn't know anything about it. I'm just looking at the boat. And then I turned, and behind me, there's a tent. And there's something going on in this tent right behind me. And Robert happened to have his camera out. And I realized at some point that somebody was in there, and it was Richard Dreyfuss. He was in there doing photos and talks and little things with meet and greet kind of stuff. Anyway, at some point, his bodyguard guy, who I was talking to right next, well, I say bodyguard, the big guy that made sure nobody else got in the tent, was standing right there beside me, and we got to talking, and he's asking me about the Indianapolis. And so we had kind of got a little talk going, and then suddenly he said to me, Mr. Dreyfuss is coming out, and I said, can I meet him? And he said, I can't introduce you. I can't do that. But he didn't move me. And so that was my cue to just stand there, and I lifted the flap for Richard, and he came face to face with me, and I've got my Indianapolis gear on, and I had totally unprepared. I never even thought I would meet Mr. Dreyfuss, or I hadn't sought to. To me, it was just see what's going on. But I came face to face suddenly with Richard Dreyfuss, and he looked at me and looked at my gear. I remember looking up at my hat, looking at my shirt. And then I said, Mr. Dreyfuss, my name's Jim Belcher, Jr. I'm the son of a USS Indianapolis survivor. And I said, I just want to thank you for being a part of a movie that saved my father's life. And I didn't really have much time to explain. I didn't explain anything to him. I just wanted to say that. But the reason that came out of my mouth, and the reason I thought I had to tell him that, was because here's an opportunity. I saw Jaws in '75. My dad never watched it. my dad and several of the survivors said, I don't need to watch it. I already lived it. So that was their way of explaining why they didn't want to go see a shark movie. And I totally get it. It wasn't like Dad wouldn't watch sharks and didn't have anything to do with sharks, because my dad loved to deep sea fish. He loved to be out on the ocean. He was on 7 more ships from 1950 to 1969. He loved being out at sea. That's why I said when I'm watching the movie and I'm looking at it, and my dad was rough around the edges and straight to the point with what he was thinking, and he drank. He drank heavily. My dad drank a lot. And so when I saw Robert Shaw playing Quint in the movie, the more I watched him, the more I said, man, he's a lot like my dad. And not knowing that monologue was coming up. So when the monologue come up, yes, my jaw hit the floor. I'm sitting there. I was tailback on our football team. I'm sitting with my football team on each side of me in summer of '75. And we're all graduating and going on to college. So this is a kind of a final hurrah for all of us. And of course, I'm in the movie. So when the movie was over, we came out and I told the guys, I said, my dad was on that ship. And they just kind of looked at me and said, yeah, right. Yeah, right. They all knew my dad. Most of them knew my dad. And Dad's big. I told you, 6'4", about at that time, probably about 225, 230. He scared a lot of people, much like Robert Shaw would. So they came to find out that, yeah, Dad was on the ship. After Jaws came out, that movie came out, and I came home and told Dad what was on it, and he had no interest in seeing it. The reporters started coming to our house. That was in late June of '75. And the anniversary of the sinking, which, by the way, in the monologue was wrong. They said June 29th. The actual anniversary is July 30th. And it was July 30th because on the night of the 29th of July, this clock struck midnight, July 30th, and 12 minutes later, they were hit by torpedoes. So you'll oftentimes see the 29th is the night that they were torpedoed, but in reality, technically, it was 12 minutes after midnight, so it's the 30th. So you'll see that 29th number pop up a lot, but it's usually July 29th. And I'm going to go back and tell you that in the interview with Bob Gauss about the date, he accidentally got the date wrong in the interview. And he said, and he was a survivor of the Indianapolis, he happened to say June 29th, 1945. So there's a strong case for that date came from Bob Gauss by accident. So anyway, I went home and talked to Dad, and he was not interested in seeing the movie. And life went on, but within weeks, newspaper reporters and television crews started showing up at our house. And they wanted an interview with my dad. How they found him in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, in the middle of nowhere, it's just amazing. But the state newspaper and television came, and the local, and it overwhelmed him. He just didn't want to talk about it. I was 11 and a half when I found out Dad was on the ship by accident, and he did not talk to me. His only answer was, it was the Indianapolis and it sank. I went and asked my mom, what ship was it? And she said, I don't know. He never told me. And they had been married 14 years. So it was like a big secret. And Dad was still in the Navy and a chief petty officer. And if you're this child, a Navy brat or a military brat, and your dad's a senior NCO, you know better than when he looks like he's in a bad mood. You don't go over and ask him stupid questions. So I never asked him after that. I just left it alone. But I did go to the library. And I checked out Abandoned Ship by Richard Newcomb. And I was shocked. I saw my dad's name in a book at 11 and a half, 12 years old. That shocked me. And then I read the book. And I wish I could say, oh, my gosh, I started to realize. But I was 12, 11 and a half, 12. To me, it was a story. It was a book. It was my dad was on the ship, but he never talked about what happened or that anything bothered him about it. And I'm too young to realize that all that drinking and all the things that the anger and all of those things had anything to do with it. So life went on after 11 and a half until 75. Jaws came out, and that opened a can of worms, because now the reporters are coming instead of me asking questions. And I'm the oldest of three, and my brothers kind of followed my lead. We just didn't talk about the dad. But when the reporters came that first year, I was waiting to go to college, home for the summer. And I remember them talking to him, and he answered with 1, 2, 3 word answers, and that was it. But the next year I was gone, and my mother called me and told me that Dad was talking more. And every year after that, they would descend on him in early July. And every year he would talk a little bit more. And so getting back to what I said to Mr. Dreyfus, in 1982, beyond all reasonable doubt and reason, Dad, for whatever reason, decided to quit drinking. There were a lot of, it caused a lot of problems in our family, but he had never quit before. So we had no idea that he was even thinking about quitting. But I think what happened, and the reason I said what I said to Mr. Dreyfus, I figured out later as an adult and working a lot with World War II vets and such, was I think those reporters showing up got him to start healing. And in that healing, I think he got to a point, he wasn't healed. They'll never be healed. But I think he got to a point where he could let go of the drinking because it was causing so many problems in his life. And in 1982, February of 82 or so, my mom told me he hadn't had a drink in 2 weeks, and we just watched him, and he never had another drink for the rest of his life. And I honestly believe, and then he started going to reunions, the Indianapolis reunions, reuniting with his shipmates. We built the monument here in Indianapolis, which is the reason I'm here today, because it means so much to our family in particular. It represents a big change in my family. I had 19 years of best friend with my dad. He became the dad that I always wanted as a child, and I got it as an adult. But you know what? Better something than nothing. And
Right.
And I was so grateful to Jaws, and that's the reason. Almost spontaneously, I said what I said to Richard Dreyfus, and when I said that to Richard Dreyfus, and Robert took a photograph as we were talking, a couple of photographs. Robert said he saw a tear go down Richard Dreyfus's cheek as I said what I said. And he said back to me, the only thing he said to me was, "I remember those boys." And that was, he had met some of the Indianapolis boys over the years, and that was the impact that it had on him, was that tear. I don't think anybody ever approached anybody else within the two communities, the Indianapolis families and community and the Jaws community. I don't think anybody ever said Jaws was anything more than entertainment, in an entertainment movie. But I just thought it's important to say that Jaws in my family was much more important than that. It became a healing tool. And I got to believe that the other survivors, and I'm asking the other children now, what did Jaws do to you, your family? Wow. Because some of the guys actually watched the movie. I know some of the survivors did watch the movie.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing the majority did not. And then we got the Lost at Sea families who their loved one never came home. I'm guessing that most of them didn't want to watch it as well.
Wow.
I think it is a little bit of a crack. Sorry, Nate, I'm sorry. A little crack of of therapy when they see that in the film. And this was before, and I'm in healthcare. Was PTSD. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then to see that little crack to open up a little bit.
Yeah, but I think time,
shine that light.
I think time has a lot to do with that, and I'm telling you
Absolutely.
that because of, I know my dad was 3 different generations of war, and I've met a lot of veterans who were in each and sometimes more than one. One of the first things I noticed about the Vietnam era veterans, I went in '76, so it was post-Vietnam. But a lot of my brothers, the older brothers of my friends, were coming home when I was going in, and I noticed none of them talked either. They were just like my dad.
Right. Right.
And back then, coming home from the war, nobody wanted to talk to them either. So,
No.
so I think it was as close. I think World War II, Korea, Vietnam had one thing in common, and that is you didn't have a bunch of psychologists and such descending on them as soon as they came home. But I tell you, this is what I see with my current vets, and I've maybe put 20 different young people into the military over the years because I was Air Force, and they always come to me and ask me, you know, what's it like in the service? And then lo and behold, they enlist or go in. It's all volunteer now. But one thing I've noticed with our current younger veterans, especially in the desert wars, bless their hearts, that as soon as they can be in theater and be home in 12 hours or less. And the first thing the military wants to do now seems to be to descend on them and get them to start talking. And in some respects, I understand the thinking process there, that starts the healing. But the thing is that I think the missing element there is they're not ready.
Correct.
And they need time to decompress. And my dad, after the Indianapolis incident, they went to Base Hospital 18 in Guam. They rested and recovered there. Quietly and the press, nobody was allowed to talk to them, just the medical staff. And then they put them on a rest and relaxation island and let them kind of be alone with good food and beer and whatever they wanted. And then they put them on the Hollandia and brought them home. And they landed in San Diego and all went home. There was nobody there to say, you know, let me talk to you about what just happened. Yeah. So, and then they went home, and I think in those days, you know, it was your family and your church that carried you. And generally, my dad and all the others said, I don't want to talk about it, and the family let them be silent. And then Sarah Bladdock came along and wrote the book Indianapolis, and one of the questions when she was interviewing them with a video interview over 10 years, one of the questions she asked was, how long was it before you started talking? And this is Indianapolis survivors, and she interviewed 107 Indianapolis survivors. And the answer, I did the math with the answer that they had, and the average was somewhere between 25 and 30 years.
Golly.
And that was exactly what happened with my dad. So there comes a time when they're ready. I remember at one point where Dad, on the 50th anniversary of the sinking, we were at a reunion, and family members for the Lost at Sea will descend on these survivors and want to know what happened to my loved one. Did you see him? Did he die peacefully? Was it, they want to know. They don't have any information. They don't know.
They want that closure.
Yeah, but the sad part is these survivors now are reliving, those moments. Yeah. And I was with my dad and a group of 2 other survivors at one time. I'm just standing there. I think I was in my 20s or early 30s. And I remember a lady coming up to the 3 guys, and my dad was one, and she held up a picture and she said something to the effect of, "Did you know my brother?" or something like that. And she gave the name and all of that. And they're looking at the picture. And I remember they looked at each other, which I thought was kind of odd. And then one of them said, "No, I'm sorry, we didn't know him." And she, sadly, but there's all these other survivors in the hotel there. She's running around in the lobby trying to find them. So she left. And as soon as she turned and got out of earshot, one of the guys turned to the other 2, my dad, one of them, and said, "How could we tell her?"
Yeah, survivor's guilt.
They did. They told her they didn't see it, they didn't know. But then the next breath, one of the guys admits that he did know the guy, or did know, and they knew. And I think the way I interpreted that at the time, because I knew better than to sit and try to have Dad tell me something he didn't want to talk about. That was early on in the reunions, and Dad said to me later when we were talking, He said, Jim, he said, I spent 30 years trying to forget it and 20 years trying to remember. They buried that trauma so deep and so far back. Some of these guys were so far out of it, the second, third, fourth day, fifth day in the water. They were so far out of it that they didn't even really know after 50 years whether it was a dream or it really happened. And they chose to believe that it was a dream. And some of those probably were not dreams. So it's burying that trauma. And then later, when you are willing to talk about it, it sneaks up on you and you still want to keep it buried. So that's what I saw happening over the years. That's what I saw go through all the survivors, even Harold, our last living survivor. When he talks about what he saw in the water and he's one that doesn't talk a lot, but what he does say, you got to read between the lines and realize it was not good. Guys were killing each other out there because they were hallucinating. There were stories of the guys drinking salt water and lasting anywhere from half hour to 2 hours before they started foaming at the mouth and hallucinating. And then they all had these little knives, sheaths on their uniform pants or whatever. And if they had their knives on them, they'd pull their knives out and start. Some of the guys said stabbing the guy right next to him, thinking he was Japanese. And so they were hallucinating. And it was really horrible. Some of the things those young guys think about it, 18 years old, how prepared were we for something like that? And they had to carry that then for the rest of their lives. And that's what my dad was. To me, after I started to realize all of that as an adult, read a lot more, learned more, and the biggest thing is met the other survivors and talked to them in detail. I volunteered to help them, and so after hours, a lot of times we were just sitting, at a bar, or we're sitting in a quiet room or in the lobby of a hotel, and they're just tired, and we're just talking, and they open up and they start talking about things that I know they wouldn't talk to other people about. And that's when I started to realize that was my dad. Dad passed in 2001, and for years after Dad passed, I'm listening to the other survivors talk, and they were just like my dad. So they were all hurt, and they were all trying to heal. And another lesson I learned from all that was all of us children, when I do presentations and programs and talk about the Indianapolis survivors and the lost at sea families, I very seldom can get through a program without breaking down myself. And that made me realize that I carry my dad's trauma, because my dad, my way of thinking is, in order for him to survive, he had to offload some of that pain. And we gladly took some of that pain because it made him a better person for us to deal with. So we accepted a lot of his faults, would be a better way of saying it, I guess. And then we carried his pain after we started to understand, what he had been through. So yeah, I get emotional when I'm talking about my father, because even though it was horrible growing up with all the things he went through night terrors every night. My mother said he could not sleep a single night without thrashing in the bed. She said he would be gurgling like he was drowning. And she said he would wake up thrashing and doing all that. And then as soon as he realized he was awake, he'd go back to sleep. And she said seldom did he sleep all night, every consecutive nights without that happening. And if he did, it would happen more than once the next night. So, but then he started, the reunion started. Well, Jaws came out and the reporters started coming. And mom mentioned to me that she noticed that the night terrors were spreading out. And then he started reconnecting with the other survivors, and huge change. She said sometimes it was days, sometimes it was weeks. And towards the end of my dad's life, after he quit drinking, I don't even know that he was having night terrors anymore. So he healed, but it took 50 some years, 60 years, 70, 60 years almost. Yeah.
I think a real positive that I
know,
think that Couple things that pull from there. Number one is the parallel that I see between you and your father. Your father lived through that experience, yet continued to carry on even through the military career. Obviously, try to provide a home life for you guys. And
Oh, yeah.
you once his absence was there, you carried that torch, and you really stepped forward with that. And so I think that's a real parallel that perhaps, I don't know whether I hope you see that in yourself, that carries over from your father, and
That makes
you
sense.
took such an active role. I just think is incredibly commendable with what you've done since then.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do it for all the guys. My dad clearly is the motivation, but I also do it for my mother because it gives me an opportunity to go out there and explain, what was going on in Japan with the Japanese people. We seem to think that the cultural divide between the Japanese and us, we would just blame it on the emperor, or would blame it on culture. And the reality is my mother is more like us than different. She always was. In fact, when Dad died in 2001, my brothers and I sat down while she was in mourning. He died in May of 2001, and she had agreed to come to her first Indianapolis reunion that July. So Dad died 3 months before the reunion, and I just assumed that Mom wouldn't go without him. But she was in mourning, but she said, no, I promised him I would go, so I'm going. We walked down to the Indianapolis monument that I was at this morning. I'm going to get emotional talking about this.
Sorry.
No, but that's okay. It's good. We came to Indianapolis after Dad died 3 months, and Mom was clearly still hurt. And as we came into town, instead of checking into the hotel, we went straight to the monument. She wanted to see his name. All 1,195 names are on the monument, and the ones that survived have a star next to them. And there are very few stars. There's only 1 out of 4 that survived. So we went down there, and when we came around and walked down there, she just wanted to see my dad's name. And there was an interview going on in front of the monument, just like the picture you show right there, standing right in front of the ship. On the wall there were 2 guys standing there, and there was a BBC, British Broadcasting Corp, television interview going on, and the 2 guys were Mike Carilla and Bob McGigan, 2 of the survivors that I knew. Now keep in mind, they'd never seen my mother, they didn't know her, and we're standing there. I held my mom and I said, let them finish the interview and then we can go down there. We didn't want to interrupt. And Bob and Mike saw my mother, and I think it clicked. They knew me, and they said, that must be Jim Belcher, my dad's wife, the little Japanese woman. And they stopped the interview. They waved off the interview, and then they came and approached my mother. Yeah, this is where I get emotional. And they hugged her, and they wouldn't let her go. And they hugged, and they hugged, and they cried, and they hugged, all 3 of them, all of us. And they were healing. Those men were healing. They were letting that pain go. And my mother was feeling my father in them because the pain was the same. Anyway, they let Mom go and see the name, and they stayed with her. And then when she was all done, they walked her back out, and then resumed their interview, and we went on to the hotel. But I'll never forget that moment. It meant a lot. It meant a lot. It meant a lot to them. It meant a lot to them. We're still all healing. So yeah, JAWS reopens wounds for Indianapolis families, but at the same time, it helps us heal. So I think our Lost at Sea families are some of them are still hurt, and they need to heal. But you know what JAWS did, and I just said this. We've had 2. I had two gentlemen that became close friends of mine that contacted me from overseas, and one of their primary knowledges of the Indianapolis came from seeing JAWS. One was from the Netherlands, and the other from South Africa. So JAWS opened up, made the USS Indianapolis, that monologue, 4 minutes, raised the awareness of an incident, greatest disaster by a U.S. Navy ship in the history of the U.S. Navy, loss of life. by a single Navy ship, and yet in the entire history of the U.S. Navy. And yet it's a story that most people never would have known if it hadn't been mentioned in that monologue. So I'm grateful, and most Indianapolis families are very grateful that the story, well, the exoneration of Captain McVeigh, I'm going to tell you, probably wouldn't have happened without Jaws. And I'll show you the connection. The young boy that Hunter Scott out of Pensacola, Florida, was watching TV with his father, and he's young. This is in the early 90s, 90, 91. They were watching TV, and Jaws was on, and they watched the Jaws. And when the monologue came up, young Hunter Scott, I think he was 11 years old or so, turned and said to his father, who was an elementary school principal, he said to him, "Dad, is that a true story?" And his father said, "I don't know, but let's look it up." And they did, and they found out that the Indianapolis monologue was true. And at that point, young Hunter Scott went and started reading about the Indianapolis. He went and found books and read and read. And his conclusion from what he read was that wasn't right. They shouldn't have, the captain didn't do anything wrong. He was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine that spotted him before they spotted the submarine, and the submarine sank him. And that's a picture there of Captain Hashimoto and Captain McVeigh that you've got up. Captain Hashimoto, by the way, while you've got his picture there, his granddaughter is here with us. She celebrates.
Wow.
She's a part of our Indianapolis family. Captain Hashimoto, that you've got pictured there, did not understand why the U.S. Navy sought to court-martial Captain McVeigh. He often said Captain McVeigh did nothing wrong, just like my dad and the rest of the crew, and just like young Hunter Scott did. So nothing was going to change. The Navy did court-martial Captain McVeigh. He did eventually, I think at 47, leave the Navy. He led a very quiet life for many years. And then in 68, for whatever reason, a lot of people speculated had to do with the loss of 897 or 879 of his crew. He didn't do anything wrong. But as if everybody who's responsible for other people, and especially captains of ships or commanding officers, they're always going to feel the weight of everybody who perished under their command. And Captain McVeigh, you didn't have to court-martial him for him to feel that responsibility. So in 1968, as the story goes, in Litchfield, Connecticut, he put on his uniform for the last time, stepped out on the stoop of his home, and took his service revolver and shot himself in the head and died. And we often said Captain McVeigh was the last casualty of the USS Indianapolis. But the truth be known, every one of the guys is slowly dying. I always told the guys, I had a lost at sea family one time tell me, they said, "Jim, you're lucky your father came home. Ours didn't, our loved one didn't." And then I would start telling them about what it was like to grow up with a father that was so damaged and so hurt. And I would say to him, a part of my dad died out there. He was still out there too, and will be to the end of his days. So
Yeah. Changed him forever. Absolutely.
yes, changed a lot of people forever.
Well,
Absolutely.
Again, it goes without saying that what you're doing now is, I think you're helping some change along. You're doing it through education. You're doing it through holding these ceremonies to help some people, that are involved in the families. And so you're putting yourself out there for the good and for the help of others. And that goes way above and beyond. I always refer to that as taking that step and stepping out from other people. And a lot of people are very hesitant to do that. So, Jim, that is such a badge of honor. I think perhaps you don't wear it as much as you should, but I cannot tell you how commendable that is, and how few people carry that likeness and familiarity to something you're okay doing, and that has got to be a very close thing to you.
Well,
so we want to thank you for that.
It's what I can do to help the families and to help the memories of the guys that I knew that I respected so much, and certainly to pay back my dad for a lot of crap I gave him over the years too. My mom always said I was the most like my dad. She said, "You're just like him. That's why you guys fight all the time." The more I watch, and Ryan Dacko, by the way, is here with me in Indianapolis today, and of course Richard was up here as well. So we actually have some Jaws related people showing up now at our Honor Watch, where we try to share the stories of these young boys, and such appreciation for them being here. But their connection is because their drive is, as Ryan's was when writing the Book of Quint. He wanted a deeper understanding. What motivates a guy to be like Quint?
Yeah.
And the irony is, whoever wrote, Robert Shaw, I give him the most credit. I think innately, internally, he was already Quint before he knew it. But definitely the script helped him. The words that he put to pen or edited to were the perfect words, at least for me. But the rest of the movie, my dad and I went deep sea fishing every month, year round. Deep sea fishing outside of sight of land, and Dad would not wear a life jacket. And when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, frankly, it kind of ticked me off that I had to wear one and he did not. And so I asked him, like in 1968, I was 11. I said, "Dad, how come I have to wear a life jacket and you don't?" And he looked at me and he said, "I'll never put a life jacket on again." And you guys know that line, and that was 1968. My own father said that.
Yeah.
He just much later, actually, not too long before he died, we were fishing at Lake Monticello, and I remember I said something to him about in Virginia. I said something to him to the effect of, well, what are you going to do? You don't have a life jacket on then either. I said, "What are you going to do if this boat sinks?" And he looked at me and he kind of chuckled and he said, "Well, the way I figure it, if this boat sinks, somebody's trying to tell me something." and again, to me, that's just Quint. That's the character Quint. And so whoever wrote Quint's character did a great job. And I told Ryan Dacko when I read the Book of Quint, I said, for a guy that didn't know my dad, you did an awesome job of writing a story, because that could have been him.
That really spilled into that. Yeah,
definitely.
And even his relationship with his father. Yeah, it was. Yeah. Hey, we have a couple people just wanting to say hi. Hooper, our other, he's hopping on here to say hi and join us.
How are you?
And
Your service.
we got Dawn saying, "Hello, everyone. I'm so glad I caught this live. Jim is one of my favorite people." We got Mark Ames chiming in saying, "Hello, Jim. It's a pleasure meeting you. We stayed at the Vineyard Harbor Hotel this past June."
Yes.
So, yeah.
I met so many wonderful people at Martha's Vineyard last year and this year. Sandy and I and Robert and Julia, we made some wonderful friends and connections. But more than that, it was just nice to see people that honestly appreciated the history part, because, Jaws is fiction, but that monologue is history. And most of my friends, I told you about my guy that's sitting on each side of me were my classmates from high school. We were watching the movie for the first time in June of '75. They're eating popcorn and drinking their drink, and right through the monologue, they didn't stop. They didn't pause, because to them it was a movie. It was fiction.
I remember. I'm sorry. I remember because me being such a Jaws fan. Imagine that. I had a girls' night out, and a lot of them were younger than me. It was the neighborhood girls, and we went out to go see Jaws, and I explained to them about the Indianapolis speech, and they were mouths dropped. They were like, "Are you telling me that?" Yes, that was real.
That was real.
And it changed their whole perspective. So when they watched it the second time, they had that reality. and it really changed their lives as well. I'm a nurse. I work at the University of Tennessee's Medical Center,
Oh, okay.
and I have a JAWS name badge holder. There again, imagine that.
Okay.
And and uh, and somebody asked me what was it about. I told them, I said, we're having a show. We're having this wonderful gentleman on today talking about his father was on the Indianapolis, and she knew what I was talking about, and she was very young.
And that's
So
Jaws.
but when I explained what happened, she went, "Okay, now I got to tune in. Now I got to tune in."
Well,
Yeah.
I hope this enlightens a lot of people who know
Right.
the monologue. I mean, I've never met anybody who is a true Jaws fan, and I am to some extent. I've never met anybody who couldn't, recite 100 lines from the movie. So one of the things I took down to the canal today to the National Monument that I inherited 2 years ago is a 16-foot long model of the USS Indianapolis. It was handmade by a bunch of veterans, and it was going to be thrown away. And I just happened to discover that it was up here in Indianapolis 2 years ago. I came up here and got it. I've been restoring it for 2 years, and then I've got it up here for the families to see right in front of the National Monument. We set it up on the ground there, and it's impactful. But the joke, of course, amongst all of us is Jim found a bigger boat.
Yeah, you did.
I found a bigger boat. I did. I found a bigger boat. So.
Yeah, you did.
Connection.
Jim, in talking to the survivors, did they ever know that they had delivered the atomic bomb, or did they find out later, or is that something else that they learned?
That's a good question. Think of the 879 that died in transit to Leyte. They never knew.
The ones afterwards, they knew what
But
they.
afterwards, the rumor was on August 6th and then August 9th was something happened out there. These guys are in the hospital at Base Hospital 18 in Guam, recovering, and nobody's allowed to talk to them, and they're not allowed to write home and say anything about that they were even on a ship that sank. So they're hearing the scuttlebutt, the news, and they realized that something big had happened, and that this super bomb had been dropped, and then suddenly the war is over, and that's when the story started coming out about who delivered what and the tragedy and so on, because the actual announcement to the families that the fellas that their loved ones were involved in the sinking of the Indianapolis. This is the 30th of July. The end of the war announcement in the newspapers was August 15th. On the same day that they announced the war was over, the U.S. Navy released the information that the Indianapolis had sunk. So to answer your question, the Indianapolis, my dad and his guys, they did know before they left Guam that they had taken the atomic bomb that was the first bomb drop. The second bomb, of course, dropped 3 days later. So they knew they had done that. And was that any solace to any of the guys that they had delivered that bomb?
No.
That's a good question, because I would guess some of the guys, it wasn't worth it. And for some of the guys, depending on who you lost, some of these guys lost their best friends. But some of them lost multiple best friends. Some of the guys lost brothers. I mean, it's not something that I think most people think a whole lot about, because 316 came home and my dad was one, but as soon as they did, they just went home. And then for most of them, they still had to stay in the military for another couple of months before they were allowed to separate. War was over, but they still were in uniform, and they sent them wherever, and they just had to wait out their time. But yes, Dad did eventually know that they delivered the atomic bomb. But it's like one of the guys told me before. He said, before the bombs were dropped, and certainly there wasn't a whole lot of news. There was news, but not, visual. You couldn't picture it.
Sure.
It was too big. And so they had the still pictures and such. When I do my presentation, I told you, I do both sides of World War II. I'm talking about the Japanese perspective. One of the most impactful pictures I have that I show was a photograph of the Nagasaki bomb detonating from the perspective of the Japanese. It's a picture taken from the ground, not from the air. Think about this. Every picture you probably have seen of the atomic bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, were from the air. Yet one of the pictures I chose to show my classes, the kids, is what it must have looked like for my grandfather at Nagasaki when that second bomb was off. Because looking from the ground up, it's scary. It's very, very scary. So I think dropping those bombs was necessary, but at the same time, Dad and his guys, yes, they knew what they dropped, but they like the one guy said, taking it over there. You could have told us it was an atomic bomb. It wouldn't have made a difference. No. Because we had so many bombs on our ship anyway,
Here is, I believe, I'm assuming this is a picture you're talking about?
Yes, that's the one.
Is that that's a real picture?
Yes. That one's colorized. It's not colorized in the photo. And if you notice, there's a couple of guys casually walking over there. Right here. I tell you what our family said when their description of the atomic bomb drops initially was, wow, we didn't even see all the planes come and drop all those bombs. Their immediate assumption was that it was a massive aerial bombing by a bunch of planes that were not visible or so high up that they couldn't have seen them. Air defense was at its weakest by then anyway, and when the two bombs were delivered by 3 planes each time they came. It was just 3 B-29s, right. And that didn't even trigger a response from the Japanese for the most part. They just did the air raid signals, which of course wouldn't do anything for that. And so that is an awesome picture, though, and it is a picture that most Americans ought to see.
Never seen it.
I know. Yeah, the black and white. I think the black and white version of it is actually more impactful, to be honest with you.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, are you familiar with the book Ghosts of Hiroshima by Charles Pellegrino that he just?
I know of it. I haven't read it.
It was fascinating it really tells you the point of view of the Japanese and what the bombs did, and it was a fascinating. For me myself, I grew up. I started becoming a World War II fan, and back in the 90s, and I didn't know much back then about the Japanese, and I harbored ill will towards the Japanese. But the more I learned about World War II, the more I learned about the Japanese people, that they were as innocent as anybody, and they suffered as much as anybody else, especially the civilians that died during they didn't deserve that. It had to be done, like you said, casualties of war. But reading that book opened my eyes until these normal Japanese families and how they did it.
Being able to tell their story and talk both sides I've been able then to impart on a lot of young people that, it's not as simple as you think. I've heard people say over and over, they should have hung Hirohito at the end of the war for all the war crimes and all. I don't think people understand that our Constitution protects us from the military running our government. But at the end of World War II, it wasn't just the military running the Japanese government. It was specifically the army running the government. Yep. Hirohito wanted to surrender after the first bomb, and the army said no, and they had the power. And so Hirohito was already anguishing over it when the second bomb was dropped, and he was saying, my people are suffering. And the army was still refusing to surrender, but Hirohito went ahead and recorded a surrender record, a recording. And there was actually a coup attempt at the Imperial Palace where they tried to find those recordings before they were released and destroy them, and then kind of essentially lock up the emperor, keep him quiet until they could decide what they wanted to do. But they were unsuccessful. The Imperial Guard actually defeated this rogue army unit that went in there to take him out. These are stories that our kids need to hear, because it follows right into our government, the American government. These people have been lied to since before the war. They were told they were winning the war. My uncle in the Imperial Japanese Army, they honestly believed they were winning the war. They were told over and over, we're winning the war. So their government is lying to them, their military, their army is lying to them and won't surrender. And they convince their population to die rather than surrender. But for the wrong reasons, right? These people, my mother honestly believed that we were going to slaughter them even if they did surrender. So I always pose that question to young people. I say, what would you do if all the young men were gone? And it was, a choice of, do I take a chance and surrender, or do I believe what I was told, that even if I surrender, they're going to kill us? And most of us would fight for our families and fight for our younger brothers and sisters and grandparents, and we would die. And do you see parallels with that, with what's going on in the Middle East right now, with the civilians there being told that, we want to slaughter them, we want to kill them. The average American just wants peace. The average Japanese in World War II probably, my mother said it. You know what her words were when she found out that Hirohito announced the surrender? And that was the first time she ever heard his voice on the radio. She said, we were happy. We were happy. And they still thought the Americans might kill them. But we were happy. They were suffering so bad by the end of the war. They were starving. They had no future. And even being told they were winning the war, they didn't believe it by the end of the war. That's where they were. And that's all because of Jaws.
So it's your fault. It's the fake shark's fault.
yeah, it was Bruce's fault.
It's Bruce's fault.
Well,
damn fish.
Well, Jim, first off, I want to tell you, coming on tonight, I've been so anxious and so looking forward to you joining us tonight that we are a very talkative group. And I think this is the least any of us have ever talked in the last several years. I've just been so in awe of you and your story and what you're doing. And I just really want to thank you for taking
you're
your
welcome.
time.
You're welcome.
Can we just talk for another 5 hours, man?
I don't think my makeup can handle it because it's already crying.
At some point, every one of us were choked up going through this episode, and so there again, you taking the time to do this, especially after the day that you had, because you've been doing. I'm sure this is just a continuation of your day. I can't commend you enough for the sincerity that you put into this, because you wouldn't do this for monetary gain. You wouldn't do this for anything else unless you felt this strongly and this was this important to you. And I cannot tell you enough, none of us can, how important that is to us who are outside of this entire world. But the fact that you're willing to take the time to do this, to give and to give back and to help. Well, Jim is just so commendable. I don't know what else I could possibly say other than thank you. I mean, I really.
Well, you're welcome. All of you are very welcome. If anybody, I don't want to open a floodstream, but certainly if anybody invites me to come speak, and if there's any way possible I can get there. When I speak at universities, often they'll help out a little bit with a stipend or something, the honorarium, but I don't ask for it. And the same thing when I came up to Martha's Vineyard this year. I didn't ask for anything in return. I just, I sell some used books that tell the Indianapolis story, and I put some inserts in there that tell my father's story in particular, and I sign them, and I just ask for whatever people feel like it's worth, the talk that I did. But I go to schools and I go to military organizations, and I wouldn't charge them at all. So I would never ask. There have been some corporate people that came up to me for different reasons, or civic organizations that normally book speakers. And if they ask me, they'll usually say, how much do you charge? And I have no number. I don't charge anything. What I do is I just say, if you can offset my expenses, I'm happy. I'm not out to make anything. If you can, I'll sleep on your sofa if that's what it takes to be
I
there.
have that. Mine pulls out toward the bed. You're good.
So yeah, and not too far from you, by the way, is in Nashville.
Exactly, Richard and I can take you out for dinner. We're good.
Is Earl Henry was the dentist on the ship. Just real quick, I'll tell you, Earl Henry was the dentist on the ship. He was a lieutenant commander. He came home to Memphis. He lived in Kentucky at the time. The ship, when it was at Okinawa before the sinking, I mean, not at Okinawa, I'm sorry, at Mare Island for the repairs, Earl Henry, the lieutenant commander and doctor, was able to come home to Memphis briefly on leave to see his wife, who was very pregnant, over 8 months, and or at 8 months, I guess. So she was a little bit early, I think, when she delivered. But anyway, they spent, there's a photograph that Earl Jr., the son, shows us, and he always points to it. And it says, Mom and Dad sitting at a table at the Peabody Hotel in Memphis. Yeah, with the duck from walking in and jumping the fountain and all.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, even back in 45, that was a place to be. And so they're having dinner. Earl holds that picture of Earl Jr. and says, and he's in Nashville. He says, this is the only family portrait we have, because his mom was pregnant with him. So Earl Sr. goes back to the Indianapolis, and they haven't left California yet, but they're getting ready to with the atomic bomb. And Earl Jr. is born prematurely. Oh. Well, his dad then can't come home because they've got to go. But he writes a beautiful card to Earl Jr., his son, who has just been born. And he says, if I'll see you essentially when I get back. He says, if I can be half as good a father to you as your mother is, I'll be happy. And he never came home. Earl's father was also into birds. He did bird calls on the ship, and just by pure luck, somebody recorded those. Back then they had those record players that you could record things on.
You can record on.
Earl Jr. puts that recording on, and his father is doing bird calls and talks and explains which bird, and then does the next one and the next one. And he holds that up and he says, this is the only time I ever heard my father's voice. And it's just these stories that every one of these families have these stories, and it just rips your heart out that young Earl he's got the card at his house. His dad wrote, he's got the record, and we've listened to, you can go online. I believe some of that is online now. But wow. Earl Henry, his dad didn't come home, and that's the story that was told 879 times with the USS Indianapolis. So, the dads like mine came home damaged, and dads like Earl's didn't come home at all.
Yeah. And I was going to share something with you before we leave. The fact that this has, even though it's in a fictitious movie, my nephew, who is in his 20s, wanted to hear this podcast because he's very interested in World War II. And awesome. On the other private note, or with me, is that because of the stories that you just told, gives me an inclination, or in my brain, of what my grandfather did, what happened to him in World War II. He was in the South Pacific, I believe, and on ship there. But it gives me a better understanding that what had happened, that he did make it home, unlike some others. And because of that, I'm here today to talk to you.
Well, the stories of the European theater are just as awesome. Now, we live near Bedford, Virginia, and of course the Bedford Boys and the 29th Division, 116th Infantry, Company A, the Bedford Boys. They were the first to land at Omaha Beach. They got mowed down. One boat, 32 boys in it. 19 dropped right there on the beach. And they're all from a small community. They were a National Guard unit. So they all grew up together. They were cousins and married to each other's brothers or sisters. And they just, to to be decimated like that community to this day still is mourning. And I'm a honorary colonel in the 116th for the work that I've done for them as well, and my wife, both of us. And we're also honorary survivors of the USS Indianapolis. And last year, the greatest honor of my life, I think, I was named an honorary Lost at Sea member. And I'm a survivor child. So our Lost at Sea families at least appreciate that I'm out there telling their stories as well, because they need to be told.
Jane, for those of us that want to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jane.
I was going to say, and after this tonight, there's going to be a lot more who's going to take that into consideration.
Well, like I said, you all are more than welcome to pass on contact information for me as far as emails and stuff, so that if anybody wants and can set up it can be a high school, junior high. I do a lot of military venues. And I actually went down and met Jeffrey Voorhees down in Norfolk when he showed up to do Horror Con, I think it was, in Norfolk, Virginia. And Jeffrey and I have become very good friends, Alex Kintner. We actually stayed in the same house together for the New London Maritime Festival last year. Yeah, and that was great to just split a house with him and sit and talk. And I'm hearing his Jaws childhood stories, of course, and he's asking me, he's just grilling me over the Indianapolis, and it was just a lot of fun. And my son, one of my two sons, was with me with his friend, and they got to experience that. Not only, it was a two-way street. I mean, he was just blown away with the Indianapolis, and we had such a wonderful reception. That was the first actual venue I did where I was asked to come and speak and present. Had a booth out and everything, because I don't sell stuff. I offer the books for donations to offset the expenses, but I don't sell them. I don't have a price that says you got to pay this or you can't walk out the room. I put a jar over there and just tell people, just whatever you think it's worth, you put it in there, and I appreciate any help you can get to do the next venue. He
could probably make about $500 with all of us right now.
Well, again, I try to remind people every penny of it goes back to the next school, and the next venue that I do. My wife and I fund all of this ourselves, and we're not wealthy people, but I like to drive. I'm not a fan of TSA, so I don't fly very far, but I do. I have opened a museum telling Indy stories in Portland, and then not in Portland, in Washington State, and we do go. I'm invited by a Native American group, with a lot of Native American groups, to speak in Tulsa and Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, repeatedly, and I've been. I'm a representative of the USS Indianapolis now, with a group of veterans to speak in Portland, Oregon. And they just want all our Indy guys are gone, and I grew up with these guys and talked to these guys, and so I'm able to share their stories and kind of tell their point of view to school kids. We go to schools all week long in Portland. We'll hit like 2 or 3 schools and just talk to the kids.
Hey, Jim, for those of us that want to learn more about the Indianapolis, which book would you recommend is the best book?
That's a great question. Doug Stanton wrote an awesome book called In Harm's Way.
I have that book.
That book is probably, if you like to read a book and read a story, I always recommend In Harm's Way, because it is just it's a phenomenal read. When my wife was reading it, and the guys got in the water, it happened to be almost midnight, and she had to get up the next day, and she couldn't put the book down. She ended up reading it until the guys got out of the water. So that's how captivating that book was. And it's very, I love Doug Stanton. He's been wonderful. He wrote 12 Strong, the book Horse Soldiers, which became the movie 12 Strong. But before that, he did In Harm's Way, and that was his introduction to military veteran stories, telling them that way. He did a great job. He's a personal friend. I like him. He's right up front. But the other one that I would recommend, if you know the Indianapolis story and you want to really get digging deep into it, read Indianapolis by Sarah Vladeck. That book, and Lynn Vincent, that book gets you really, really into the story and the background and the myths and the falsehoods that were perpetuated by the Navy. Tells you about the court-martial, everything that was going on. That book, if you're already somewhat familiar with Indianapolis, the story, I would say go there. And Sarah, bless her heart, came out from California, interviewed my mom to talk to her. There's also a documentary video. I would strongly recommend you watch that before you do any. If you watch the documentary, you want to read the books. And the documentary is called USS Indianapolis, The Legacy. And it's by Sarah Vladeck as well. Those 107 interviews I told you she did. She took those interviews, and where they answered the same questions, sometimes 3 different survivors will answer the question for you. One, the first third of the sentence, the next, the middle third, and next, the last third. And the way she put it together, those guys are telling you their story, because their story's the same. I mean, as far as the general story of the Indianapolis, but the emotion behind it, I can't recreate the emotion that those guys had. So go watch that documentary first. And if you watch that documentary and don't want to pick up the book and read it, I'd be shocked. Do not watch the Nicolas Cage movie, USS Indianapolis, The Legacy. That's one
I made that mistake.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah. And I hate it. Oh, that's John Gromosiak there. He was our historian. He lived right here in Indianapolis. Yeah. Don't make the mistake of watching that movie, because honestly, they made the movie thinking they were going to honor the guys, and then they just ignored them and made their movie. They added love stories, and a lot of the facts are wrong, and the CGs were all bad. The writing was horrible. It was just a disaster and a half. But that's my opinion. I'm entitled to my opinion. But the survivors themselves, for the most part, were not supportive of that movie. And frankly,
if it makes you feel better, I kind of cussed at the TV when I watched it. So.
Well, if it makes you feel better,
I knew I was going, no, that's not right. So yeah,
I probably cussed worse than my Navy Chief Petty Officer father.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, do you have a website that we can order anything from, like an autographed book or something like that? I would love to have something from you.
It's funny. I've collected these autograph books from the guys over the years, and sometimes it was just I set my book down and I went back to pick it up, and there were autographs in it, and I didn't even ask. But the guy, I have a lot of books that were autographed by the survivors, and I don't have a website because I'm not a sales site. I'm not, but I do. I am at that point now where I'd be willing to, if anybody was interested, just have them email me or Facebook message me, and I would
do that.
They can find me on Facebook. That's the biggest way. The website, the Facebook group that I manage a couple, but the one that I'm most proud of is called USS Indianapolis. CA35 artifacts, memorabilia, and collectibles. And that site was not set up to sell things, although sometimes some of the families and will sell things on there, offer them, and I encourage that because.
Is this it?
No, that's the USS Indianapolis. That's a friend of mine has that page. It's a good page. Those are good pages. But no, it's called USS Indianapolis, CA35, artifacts, memorabilia, and collectibles. And the reason I started that page, that Facebook group, was I realized that I had all this very unique Indianapolis items, and so did all the other survivor children and families. That's it.
Okay.
Yep. If you can, and if you go there, and you're interested in anything, or just the best thing to do is just email or message me direct. I can show you books that you might be interested in. I did John, who owns the Orca in England. I'm trying to find a book. He doesn't know this. He'll probably know it now, but I'm trying to find him an autographed book by survivors. But he has one on the boat, and Michael Sterling down in Florida, who has the other Orca, definitely is going to end up with a autographed by survivors book to put in his boat as well.
Wow.
But yes, the answer to your question is yes. I'd be more than willing to. And also, I can reach out to other Indianapolis families if anybody's interested in really odd things. Well,
you'll be getting a message. You'll be getting a message from me for sure, Jim.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. There you go.
Look at that.
Yeah, so that's his site, and Jim, you also sent me kind of like I believe it was like a PDF or a flyer that what you send out there for educational purposes.
Yes.
If you would like, I can upload that to a Google link that I will
Please
post across our pages when we're done.
Yeah, that's what I send to teachers and anybody that asks if I'm willing to come and speak, but they want some description of what it is I'm speaking about. I do a program right now called Two Hearts, One Flag. And that's my mom and dad, 2 hearts, 1 flag. When dad died in 2001, after we went to the reunion, my brothers and I sat with her and said, Mom, she had sacrificed so much coming here to the United States in 1957. Dad died in 2001. She'd been here that entire time. Very, very tough because of dad and his issues and problems that we eventually overcame. That last 19 years was heaven. But when dad passed, we were very aware that mom had sacrificed so much to be here with us boys. And we were all 3 of us are Old Dominion University graduates. We're all have families and such. We're set, we're going. And, so we sat with my mom and said, Mom, it's okay if you want to go home. You've done everything you have to do here. We appreciate it, but we also realize how much you sacrificed for us. So if you want to go home, that's okay. And I'll never forget her response. She looked at us and looked at me and said, confused. And she said, but I am home. And that's when I realized that my Japanese mother was American.
God bless you, Jim. God bless you and your parents.
Thank you.
Everything that you've done for the country. God bless
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You all, everybody have a good evening.
You're wearing your bracelet. So.
Oh yeah. I wear mine all the time. I wear 2. Because I do all of this work, I've come across other people that have stories similar to mine, and one of them is Desmond Doss Jr.
Yes.
Of Hacksaw Ridge, and I don't know if you noticed or not, but one of my bracelets. Can you see it? Yeah, it's just one more. It's
right. That's what he said.
Yeah, from Hacksaw Ridge. Desmond and I do a program together sometimes if people ask. He's in Washington State, so it's hard to get together with him. But in October, I'll be with him in Lynchburg, Virginia, where his father, the family came from. But we do a program called "He Was Just My Dad," because his dad's Medal of Honor and everybody puts him way up on a pedestal. And my dad, USS Indianapolis survivor, and people just have this image of what these men must have been like. And Desmond and I basically commiserated in our misery with what our dads really were like. And I think it helps us to talk about our dads. And it helps other people because one thing I've noticed is I think most men probably have more problems with their dad than they had the Ozzie and Harriet, lifestyle. But it's healing to know that you're not out there alone, and that our dads, and even me as a dad, I can't even imagine the stories my sons can tell.
Yeah. Well, speaking of healing, I think you really hit and touched a lot of people tonight, and I thought I'd close out with maybe just throwing up a couple of comments people have been sending in.
Okay.
Everyone has been so glued in and tuned in to every word that you have shared with us tonight, and so yeah, I mean a lot of people are just chiming in here. Let me pull a couple of these up. Mike Sterling who you talked about with the Orca, he's on watching this. Just said nice, and is glad to see you there. You got a couple people just giving their condolences to you and thanking you for what you do. Richard Hodges is on, was with you today and said, "Hey, great seeing you today," as well. We got Paula joining us, just saying hello. Christy Cap
That's
saying,
my sister. Yeah.
Oh, good.
best show yet. I've been in tears.
That's my wife.
Christy.
That's my wife.
Yeah.
Wow.
Chris,
Okay.
you're not the only one, Chris.
Wow.
So-
Thank you. Thank you.
Mark,
Wow.
Mark saying I took out the book Indianapolis by Lynn Vincent and Sarah just the other day.
Awesome book.
And
If
just,
he goes,
just a lot
if
of
he
people.
goes to the index of that book, look in the back, you'll see James Belcher and Toyoko Belcher references to their quotes in the book, and I love some of the quotes my mom and dad that Sarah shared in there. So be sure and go to the back of the book and see that, and you'll see Sarah's was very grateful and thanked us in the back of her book where she did all the thanks for everybody that helped put the book together. She's awesome. She's awesome.
Steve is saying thank you for sharing. Looking forward to having a coffee with you, and just a lot of people just their appreciation, how amazing of an individual you are, and how much they appreciated you spending your time and sharing your story with us tonight. So, vulnerability's a tough thing, and you carry it well. And if I could ask one thing of you, if you don't mind, we have a little tradition here that we end. We don't say goodbye here on Let's Talk Jaws Live.
Okay.
What we do is we do a fins up, and then we're going to let Quint himself is going to take us out. So if we could get you to join in with that, we would absolutely love that. I'm sorry, I know you got your hands tied up there. So
I got it.
we want to thank everyone for coming on tonight. Unbelievable. I'm left
Thank you,
speechless.
Jim.
One of my favorite episodes of all time. We're going to
Yes.
everyone give a thumbs up, and we will
Farewell
see you
and
guys.
adieu to you fair Spanish ladies.
God bless you, Jim.
Farewell and adieu, you
Thank you,
ladies of Spain.
Thank you very much.
For we've received orders for to sail back to Boston. And so never more shall we see you again.
Good night, everybody. Take care.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much, Jim.
You're